All right, so for my first pick of the Super Bowl Sunday six-pack, I'm going with the Kansas City Chiefs plus 1.5. I also took some money line here, and my reasoning is quite simple. I picture myself in 10 years not betting this game and looking back and saying, did I really not bet the greatest quarterback of all time as an underdog in the Super Bowl against Jalen Hurts? And my answer to that question now will be no, because I did. And I think this is going to play out similar to the Cincinnati Kansas City line. I remember I was saying, like, look, if you want to bet the Chiefs, bet them now when we were recording that podcast, and I would wait on the Bengals. I think you're going to get more positive news over the course of 2 weeks on the Chiefs injury situation. And it makes sense why the Eagles took early money after the injuries that the Chiefs suffered. But I think eventually, and there's some risk here because maybe everyone just ends up being out. I don't think that's going to be the case, but we'll see. And ultimately, if you go, since Patrick Mahomes got in the league, when you need him to win a game for a bet, it's the best bet in the NFL since he arrived. And he's 18-6-1 against the spread as an underdog or a favorite of 3 or less. That's 75%, including the postseason. It's covered by an average of just under 6 points per game. Playing good, these are all against good teams. If Mahomes is an underdog or a favorite of 3 or less, you're playing elite teams. And look, you have the experience at quarterback advantage. I think a coaching advantage here, coaching staff advantage. We know Reed's success off of a bye week. And look, the Eagles are a great team, and they have great personnel. And they'll have the advantage in the trenches on both sides. And their path was the easiest I've ever seen for a Super Bowl team. Both, they're mutually exclusive. You can be good, and then your path can be a joke. So it's very hard to distill the sample size of like meaningful games that the Eagles played against quality competition is so limited. But I do think that, look, Hurts has been a little iffy here. And I think the Chiefs are going to say, and look, Spagnuolo will always have a great game plan in this situation. And I think they're going to try and make Hurts similar to what the Niners did, beat them in the pocket. And the Eagles offense was ugly. And they got a ton of calls. And obviously the 49ers had, all their quarterbacks get hurt. But Hurts was off on a couple throws. He hasn't been running as much either. Maybe he's still hurt a little bit. I do think the Eagles are going to have success running the ball. But my biggest questions for this Eagles team is on the defensive end. Look, the defensive line is great. I think the Chiefs are going to neutralize that with some tempo. But the secondary, I do believe, is a bit overrated. What are the data points that we have with this Eagles defense against quality competition? Well, it certainly wasn't last week without a quarterback. Certainly not against the Giants without receivers. You got to go back to, they played the Jags before the Jags, but that was in weather like that. That was before the Jags offense became who they were. You could go to Dallas indoors. What did Dak go? 24 of 24 against their zone concepts, and they put up 40 points. Rodgers, who got hurt in the game, they put up 33. You got maybe their best offense that they faced all year was the Lions in week 1, who in a trailing state got into the 30s as well. So I think Mahomes and company, he's going to have Kelsey. They're going to have 2 weeks to scheme up a lot here, and the uncertainty maybe works in their favor. They're not over relying on one receiver anyway. Like, they need Kelsey in there. The interior offensive line is great. Mahomes, we've said he's just going to get his, regardless of who's in there. I think he's going to be. He has 2 more weeks from the last time we saw him. I think he's going to be mobile enough, and I think that this Philly defense can be attacked by elite offenses, which the Chiefs certainly are, and I think that they're going to get to 30-ish at least. I think the Eagles are going to get to 24, which brings me to my second pick of the Super Bowl Sunday six-pack. I like the over, up to 50.5. That's it. I wouldn't play it at 51, which is a key number. And look, so I do think my main reasoning here is I think the Chiefs offense will be fine. I think the Eagles defense is a tad overrated, and I think the Eagles offense will still have success. I also think that both teams are going to use tempo. And these are 2 teams that can have a lot of success doing that. And I also think both teams are going to be uber aggressive on 4th downs. Instead of, hey, let's pass up this field goal, let's go for it on 4th down. And I think you're going to see that throughout the game, and it's going to be competitive throughout. So I think that this, if you give me a final score prediction, I'm going to say 30-24 Chiefs win this game. I'm trusting Mahomes and this staff to get it done. And I ultimately think they close as a favorite, assuming there's just not really bad injury news. But yeah, I'm the easiest approach here. You're not going to find a ton of value in the Super Bowl this time. I mean, line markets are efficient, but I do think that with the injury concerns, and look, there's injury concerns with Hurts too, who might be even more injured. And if you look at some of his numbers, that could be the case. But I'm backing Patrick as an underdog. If I go down in flames, so be it. Very comfortable with this play. That's my favorite bet of the Super Bowl is the Chiefs money line and catching the points.
All right, so yeah, got a few things here. First of all, in regard to the two defenses, I thought what was real interesting, in my personal model, I'm projecting all the player stats out as well, but it all starts with obviously you're going to make adjustments for each defense, and I schedule adjust the numbers, and I was surprised to see that for yards per pass attempt allowed, I have the Chiefs defense rated the same as the Eagles against the league average quarterback. So, that kind of surprised me. I think the Chiefs defense is a little bit underrated, or maybe it's that the Eagles defense is overrated, but either way, I just thought that was something that was interesting. But as far as the matchups, I mean, how do you foresee, what do you think the game plan is going to be for both teams really coming out? Because I'm thinking, okay, Chiefs probably got to get the tight ends involved. Even if guys are healthy, I still think it's going to be tough, going at slaying Bradbury all game. I think you can have more success on the interior. And that seems to be the way a lot of these Chiefs games have been setting up lately. But just kind of, and then I also think you see more Pacheco. I think he really starting to come on. And I think that, heavy formations, 2-3 tight ends on the field. I think that's kind of the Chiefs' best bet, but curious as to what you think how they're going to come out on offense.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you're going to see, number one, you're going to see more tempo. Number two, you're going to see more balance. So if you look at the Eagles numbers, I do think that their pass defense is overrated. And even if you schedule adjust it, there's also some injuries in there, some weather, and it's very difficult just to get a handle of even when you're schedule adjusted, because they just played so many bad offenses and quarterbacks, and there was injuries like last week, and it could go on and on. But I think that they're going to be able to run the ball, and I think Philly's defense is going to say you're going to have lighter boxes here. You're going to see the traditional, Gannon defense, who, by the way, Mahomes last year ripped apart. I think he had 5 touchdowns in the game, and he just went bananas. And I think that they're gonna come out, and you're going to see some good balance. You're going to see more. I mean, the Chiefs are the most pass-heavy team in the NFL, I believe, this year in neutral situations, maybe them with the Bills. But I think you'll see more running here to set up the pass, and I agree with the tight ends. And you're going to see a great script here too, which is going to so I think that ultimately the Chiefs are going to jump out to a lead. You might see some more nerves on Hurts' side, but put the Eagles in a trailing state. It's just something that they haven't done often and especially on this stage. But I agree with you. I think you're going to see heavier formations. You're going to see more running. That's where the Eagles defense is the softest to open up the pass. And I think Mahomes is going to be Mahomes, as he always is. And on the other side, I think that the Chiefs are going to take the Chiefs defense. The exception was the Bengals receivers, but last week they did a good enough job. But the Chiefs defense under Spagnuolo generally does a really good job on outside receivers, right? And they just, okay, if you have good receivers on the outside, they're going to focus on taking them away. I think that might also mirror the game plan that the 49ers had. There was always someone spying Hurts when he was in the pocket, and the defensive ends were just doing a really good job of containing him in the pocket and making sure that he had to stay in the pocket, and turned Hurts into a pocket passer, where that's not his strength. And especially if he's dealing with this injury, he's just not as accurate as he was, and his efficiency has gone down. So I think the Eagles have to come out here and rely on their ground game to set up the pass, kind of the opposite, kind of the same thing that the Chiefs are going to do. And I think they will have success running the ball here. Their offensive line is going to have a big advantage in the trenches. And I think the Chiefs are going to be focused on, all right, let's take away the outside receivers And then let's try and, if they're going to have some run blitzes, they're going to try and get them into third and long situations and then say, let's make Hurts beat us. But I agree with you on the Chiefs offensive side. You're going to see more balance mixed with tempo as well, because I think what tempo does is one of the strengths of that Eagles defense is their ability to rotate and just so many bodies on the defensive line. So I think that using tempo here is gonna be a really successful formula, and you're just gonna have so many unique design plays here with they just don't rely on any one piece. We don't know who's gonna play, but I think that's gonna work to their favor here, with the element of surprise and then just getting even more creative.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, my thought about the Chiefs too is coming into this game, that last Super Bowl they were in, being that 31-9 loss to the Bucs. I just feel like they're going to come in and say, we cannot lose the same way. And this is another defense that can get pressure. So yeah, I think that's just another reason why I think they'll go a little heavier. To your point, they could probably use some tempo. They just cannot, even though their line is a lot better than it was that year.
Yeah, that line was a joke.
But I mean, we've seen, that San Francisco line is not bad, and they got completely ravaged to the point where both their quarterbacks got hurt in the first half. So I think the Chiefs are going to look at that. I think the Chiefs are going to look at that Super Bowl against Tampa Bay and just say, we can't lose the same way, and that's kind of how they're going to think about their game plan.
Yeah, you got to give help to the tackles here. That's the weak point. The interior is going to be fine for the Chiefs, and I think a good comp, you could go to the 49ers game with the Chiefs. And look, if we have ridiculous Mahomes like he was in that 49ers game, like every once in a while he is just they're going to win this game by 20. If he's just normal good Mahomes, I think they're going to win by a touchdown. But that 49ers game, I think they can have a similar game plan here, and then just go a little heavier with a little more balance. Because the Eagles run D is worse than the 49ers run defense. So I'm ultimately trusting Mahomes. I'm trusting Reed here, and I'm trusting the fact that I do believe, based on my eye test and the numbers I'm looking at, the Eagles pass defense is overrated. Mahomes is going to be Mahomes, and the Chiefs are going to prevail, and it feels right that Mahomes would get a second Super Bowl, and then the team from the AFC would win the Super Bowl this year. That is much more battle tested, but that's no disrespect to the Eagles. Like I think it's going to be 30-24. It wouldn't shock me if the Eagles are up 24-23, and the Chiefs have the ball. And you know what? I would feel extremely confident that Mahomes is going to go down the field and win the game.
Yeah, and to your point about Hurts, and we'll get into this with one of my picks, but last 4 games, yard per attempt, 8.5, 6.5, 6.4, 4.8. And I know they've had some leads in there and things like that, but it just seems like he's not quite right as far as throwing the football. He has 2 touchdowns and 3 interceptions.
That AJ Brown was that AJ Brown pass that he missed, that deep pass early, was a perfect example of like he was hitting those consistently early in the season. And his rushing numbers, right? His rushing numbers are going down as well.
Yeah, he hasn't been quite the same. He did turn it on a little bit toward the end of that San Francisco game, but you still haven't seen the same efficiency from him as a runner that we've seen early in the year. So yeah, I lean taking the points with the Chiefs. I do kind of lean under though. I just think that because I think the Chiefs are going to be a little bit more run heavy, to your point, than they usually would be, and go a little heavier. And then the Eagles, like we know, like they're probably going to try to say, okay, we got to shorten the game. We don't want Mahomes, out there, even though we trust our defense. So I was kind of leaning under. I thought, if it gets to 51, I was going to hit the under. So interested to hear your take on that. And I also, like, what do you think of the ref in this spot? A lot of talk about Cheffers, and it's interesting because he calls a ton of penalties, but yet you see his games tend to go under, which usually when you got a lot of penalties, it ends up kind of benefiting the offense more. But Cheffers 11-1 under in the postseason.
Yeah, I don't like. I mean, the last time Cheffers ref the Super Bowl, I think he had 10 penalties on the 10 penalties on the Chiefs. But that was, their offensive line was a disaster. It just increases the variance. So I don't like when Cheffers does games. So whatever, we'll see. I usually don't like when he's a road ref either. But yeah, I mean, you could see both of these teams go a little run heavier, but I think that you're also going to see both teams go a little faster and then also be a little more aggressive than they normally are. So I think that balances it out. But to your point, I wouldn't play over 51. So 50.5 was my breaking point on how I see this game playing out. And I guess before we get to all of your props, I'll just give out my third pick of the Sunday six pack. And that's I'm going Jake Elliott under 7.5 kicker points. I guess it's kind of a hedge. Like if the Chiefs are holding the Eagles to just field goals all day, then fine. I probably am good with my Chiefs bet. But I think that number one, this number's a bit too high. Number two, the Eagles, I think, are going to be really aggressive. Number three, I think they're going to score touchdowns instead of field goals. I think both teams are going to be able to score touchdowns instead of field goals, which is why I like the over. But the Eagles have been one of the most aggressive teams all year on fourth downs. They'll even try and get you to jump to go for two from the one, so they can just sneak it, which is free money for them. And I also wouldn't be surprised if they just decide, say they score first, go up 6-0, they go for two right away, just to be like, hey, we're setting the tone. That's kind of the MO of this coaching staff. And I think when you're playing the Chiefs, you have to even have that. You have to even elevate that mentality even more. So I think they're going to be super aggressive throughout the game. So the opportunities for kicks might not be as plentiful. So my prediction was, what did I say, 30-24, which would, put them at 6 points. I think this is just a little too high. I think the line should be like under 7, -110, -115. So I think you can find under 7.5 out there for -115 still. So, and then also the Chiefs have some potential regression. Like no one missed a kick. And this isn't reason to bet it, but no one missed a kick against the wall. No one missed an extra point. And teams went like 93% on field goals. The average is 85% and then 94 for extra points. So maybe they're due to have a missed kick. And Jake Elliott is one of the only two kickers to miss an extra point since 1990. So yeah, and I like the Chiefs to win. And I think you're just going to see more touchdowns and field goals, fourth down aggressiveness. And then you could even see some 2-point conversions in here. So I like under 7.5 kicker points in a really fascinating special teams battle. Chiefs special teams struggled this year. But I think Bucker will be fine. He's looked good in the playoffs. He has the experience. The Chiefs punting is elite. And the biggest question, their return game is awful. So their punt returns, their kick returns have been bad. I think you're going to see a ton of fair catches on punt returns, maybe even kicks too. But the Chiefs punting, I mean, Townsend was one of the best all year. So if one team is punting, just if one team's punting this game, then it doesn't matter, right? So it would be a disaster for them anyway, because the other team's probably scoring. If both teams are punting, and it's a defensive battle, the Chiefs could have a pretty significant advantage as far as field position is concerned. Townsend was number one in the NFL in net punting. The Eagles were close to the bottom of the league, one of the worst punting teams in the NFL. Now, Kern last week was a disaster. Sippos will probably be back, but he wasn't great. So the punting for Philadelphia, if it becomes a field position punting game, that could make a difference. And then Boston Scott as a kick returner, he's been really good in that role. I think he would be in the top 5 if he qualified. So he's probably the most likely to maybe break a game-changing play on special teams. Other than that, I think it's probably a wash. And then you'll see more aggressiveness throughout on both teams. Chiefs win in a game that gets to, the low to mid 50s. That's my 2 cents and most of my thoughts on the game.
Yeah. All right. I'll give out mine then. I guess I'll go in order of my favorite. Let's start with Jerick McKinnon, longest rush under 9.5 yards. I show value on 9.5, under 9.5 to -170 and under 8.5 even to -119. He's gone under 9.5 in 15 of 19 games. He's only had 5 runs of 10 or more yards on his 88 carries this season. That's just 5.7%. So that means on average, he would need about upwards of 8 carries just to have a 50-50 shot at, going over 9.5 in any given game. He's averaging only 4.6 carries this year. His median is 4. And they tried to go back to what they did last postseason against the Jaguars in that first game, because last postseason, McKinnon had double-digit carries every game. So they give him 11 carries. He only gets 25 yards. And so they completely abandoned that last game and just go back to Pacheco is the lead back. McKinnon is the pass down back. And Pacheco actually cut into McKinnon's pass snaps as well. But McKinnon just hasn't been effective all year. He had that one big run, the walk-off against the Texans. Since then, 24 carries, 43 yards, 1.8 yards per carry, and a long of 7 in his last 5 games. Meanwhile, over that same exact span, running behind the same offensive line against defenses who probably are expecting to run more. Pacheco has 53 carries, 274 yards, 5.2 yards per carry, and a couple of touchdowns. So Pacheco's just been the better runner, and it started to flash in the pass game as well. So I think you're actually going to see a lot of Pacheco, and McKinnon's probably going to be used mostly as a pass protector, and he'll obviously get, his routes in, but I just don't think you're going to see another one of these big McKinnon carry games, and so then it's going to be really hard for him to get an explosive run when he's got only 188 totes all year. So that is my favorite, and that kind of also aligns with my thought that the Chiefs are going to go a little heavier. Now, if you're going 2-3 tight end, more often than not, you're going to have Pacheco in the game instead of McKinnon.
Yeah, I think McKinnon probably be heavily used. I think the Chiefs are going to have a really good screen game here in this game, but I would agree with you that my one concern would have been, hey, do we not trust the rookie in a big game? But just that would have been the AFC Championship game, right? Yeah. So if you didn't have that thought process in the AFC Championship, you're not going to have it here. So yeah, I think that was a really good sign, and you can kind of parallel what's going to happen as far as those splits. So love it. And yeah, I didn't realize that was how small of a percentage of carries he had of that. Well, that's great. Only 5%.
Yeah, wild. Man. He just hasn't been great. I mean, I think it's been overshadowed by all the touchdowns he's getting in the receiving game. He's been great there, but yeah, it just hasn't worked for them this year as a runner, which was interesting because that's how they ended the playoffs last year. It was like, oh yeah, we're just gonna use this guy as a running back after we really didn't use him all year in that role. So yeah, I think the market's too high on him. But my second prop is for the Super Bowl 57 Sunday 6-pack presented by FanDuel. I'm going with Quez Watkins under 1.5 receptions. Shop around. I show value on this. Anything under 180, but minus 180 that is. But I've seen it anywhere from 130 to 160 on the market. It's an under, so it's a chance it continues to go up. We still are about a week out from the game, so I wouldn't necessarily say jump on all of these unders immediately, but you can kind of watch where the lines are going, check the action app. If it looks like it's just getting more and more juiced up, you probably want to jump on it. But I say this every week, different player with and without Dallas Goedert in the lineup. Without Goedert, he had 5 games, averaging nearly 5 targets a game, over 3.5 catches per game, a 75% catch rate because he's running high percentage routes, just an 8 out of 7.8 for his average depth of target. And then he is getting targeted 19% of the time on a per route basis. And then with Dallas Goedert in the lineup, 14 games, averaging 1.1 catches, median of a half. He has got 1 or fewer catches in 9 of those 14 games, and his 8 out is 12.2. And because he's getting, running lower percentage routes, he's been targeted under 9% of the time per route. So I do think this is a game where maybe they finally hook up on a deep ball or something like that, which is why I'm not going back to the well with the yardage dropping for the 3rd straight week. But I do think volume wise, he's not in a good spot to get multiple catches because, again, his catch rate drops to about 58% with Goedert in the lineup, and his snaps in the passing game have actually been decreasing. And I've been talking about this for a few weeks, but in the playoffs, he's run 21 routes. Zach Pascal has run 20, 27% route participation a couple of weeks ago. And then it rebounded the next game to 52%, but that's still well below his regular season average, which was 64%. So they just seem a lot more hesitant to use him in the pass game. And maybe that's because, they rather just have, Pascal on the field because he's a run blocker, and they don't feel like they're giving up much in the pass game because Watkins has only caught 3 of his last 11 targets. And as I mentioned, he's doing almost nothing when they have Goedert. So they're probably just like, hey, we can afford to take this guy out and just throw Pascal in there, even though he's not really a threat either. So just a lot of things kind of contributing to why I like this Quez under. This week we're going receptions instead of yardage though.
And yeah, I mean, you're the Quez Watkins under king. So who am I to question? And yeah, we need this is the cherry on top for the trifecta of the Quez Watkins unders and playoffs. So yeah, I'll be joining you there. How about your third?
So my third is more of a straight up numbers play, but I was looking at this and I feel like there's a narrative, and yet the numbers don't necessarily back it up. So the narrative is like, okay, the total's moving up. This is the worst defense, one of the worst defenses of the four that the Eagles are facing in the conference, of the Final Four teams. And it's like, okay, the Eagles haven't trailed much. Now they're only favored by point and a half, so they could be throwing more. But I'm going under Jalen Hurts passing yards at 246 and a half. And I have this closer to 235 for a median, because Hurts doesn't necessarily follow like the normal quarterback game scripts where, okay, when the game is close, he throws more, and in blowouts, his numbers are low. All five, he's only gone over in 5 games. Every other game, 243 or less. And in those 5 games, only one of them was a close game. It was the 25-20 game against Chicago, where he threw for over 300. All the other games that he's thrown for a ton of yardage and gone over this number have been blowouts. And that really, so that doesn't kind of line up with the narrative here. You mentioned it, the shoulder. I still don't know if it's 100%. Obviously he'll have 2 weeks, but his numbers have been trending down really for the second half of the season. He's averaging just 7.2 yards an attempt. Already mentioned how he's trended down over the last 4 games in that category. So this is one where they could be losing, he could go under. They could be winning, he could go under. I just think the number's too high. And I think the Eagles, as they've done every other game, they're still going to come out and try to run the football. And the thing about these teams is, even though, yes, they could go tempo, they could go faster, but both of these teams are used to kind of, because their offense is so good, they're used to kind of controlling the ball and winning that time of possession battle. Well, now they're going up against each other. So, something has to give here. So you could actually see, a few fewer plays for each team, just because they're usually kind of on the positive side of that. So I like this. I like this Jalen Hurts under at 246 and a half. I think it's about 10 yards too high.
Yep, I would agree with you there. And I would say, yeah, to talk a little, do you want to summarize what the picks are? Then we can get into like just we can get into like first anytime touchdown MVPs, sure, and then any other quick props.
All right. So Stuck is going with the Kansas City Chiefs plus 1.5, the over 50.5, and Jake Elliott under 7.5. Kicking points, I'm going with Jerick McKinnon under 9.5 for his longest rush. Quez Watkins under 1.5 receptions, and Jalen Hurts under 246.5 passing yards. And I should mention regarding that Hurts prop, Kansas City defense, to your point, held Burrow to 270 on 41 attempts, 6.6 yards per an attempt. And then the game before that, Trevor Lawrence just 217 on 39 attempts. That was just 5.6 yards an attempt. So in this postseason, they've been holding these quarterbacks under their season averages in losing efforts for those quarterbacks. So just another.
And that was with 3 rookies last week, and I expect Snead to be back from concussion protocol in time for the Super Bowl. And everyone wants to bet the first touchdown. I prefer anytime touchdown. And just to get back to my bets, I mean, I think that the Chiefs are going to have a just flawless game plan, come out here, and they're going to take a lead early. And by the way, this whole Eagles team, everything about them, they're front runners, right? Like they're elite front runners. They're pass rush, their ability to run the ball. And most of the time this year, they have the lead. So if the Chiefs are jump out, I think that's a big advantage here. But if Mahomes is behind, I'm not too worried. But that leads me to believe I would look at a Chief for the first touchdown. But I prefer anytime touchdown. I'll let you make the case here. Jody Fortson.
Jody
right?
Fortson.
We have to
Love
bet him
him.
anytime touchdown, right?
Love this guy for anytime touchdown. So the case for him is pretty simple. When this guy catches a pass, it usually goes for a touchdown. 29% of his career catches have gone for touchdown. This year, 38% of his targets have come inside the 10, not even the red zone, but inside the 10. And he's running about 8 routes per game, about a 20% route participation rate, which is pretty good for a third tight end, especially when you consider that it's a third tight end on a team with the greatest quarterback on the planet right now, and on a team that's generally more pass heavy than the league average. So Jody Fortson is that he just came back.
And you have wide receiver injuries too.
Yeah. And you have wide receiver injuries. And I think, it's a bigger prop market for the Super Bowl, right? So, sometimes we give out a prop on this podcast and it just moves to a point where you can't even bet it anymore. I don't think that'll be the case with things like this, because the market's so big. But maybe he goes a little under the radar just because he just came back last game for the for the AFC Championship. He was out for about a month, a little over a month, I believe, prior to that. And Blake Bell was actually filling in as that number 3 tight end, but Blake Bell was inactive in Fortson's return. So I'm expecting that to be the case, barring just a bunch of wide receiver injuries and they decide to just bring up 4 tight ends. And if I will say this too, if you see the inactives come out on Super Bowl Sunday, a couple hours before the game, and they have 4 tight ends active, they have Fortson and Bell active, that would scare me a little bit off the over, because then I would be like, okay, the Chiefs really are about to commit to this like heavy game plan. Yep. So that is something to kind of watch.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fortson. Yeah. I love it. For the pride of Valdosta State. And yeah, I think, and also just think about it. Like, I think the Chiefs are going to have just a flawless script early. And part of that's going to be, hey, if the first time they're near the end zone, where are all the eyes going to be? It's going to be on Travis Kelce. You have a second tight end in there, little misdirection. You could see him end up being wide open with all the eyes on Kelce, because that's where all the attention is going to be for the Eagles dedicated to. So I love that. I love Fortson. Kelce anytime touchdown, as you say, is never a bad bet. Could Kelce, from an MVP perspective, it's very hard for me to see Mahomes not winning it if the Chiefs win. I mean, maybe Kelce, tight ends never won it, but Kelce's basically a receiver. But they have so many different wide receiver options, so many different running back options. It's hard for me. The Eagles, maybe you could make a case for someone other than the quarterback. Any thoughts on MVP?
Yeah, so I approach it a little bit differently. I tried, because I'm not usually betting these markets on a normal week, as people that follow me probably realize, whether it be anytime touchdown or MVP. But I do think the MVP market, it's the last game. So I kind of try to put myself in the mind of somebody who's, following us, looking for an edge, and just how would you bet this to kind of have fun, take advantage of the fact that it's the last time you're going to be able to bet football, and still make, plus EV bets that give yourself a good chance to profit. So I kind of do it like this. I look at it like, okay, you have a guy like Jalen Hurts. He's plus 130 on FanDuel, right? That's overpriced if you just look at the fact that, okay, about 70% of the time quarterbacks will win it. If you go back over the last 15 or so years, you divide that in half, it's a close game, about 35% chance. True odds probably should be closer to 170, 180. If you think the Eagles are more likely to win the game, maybe you get down to 150, 140. But 130 is probably a little bit high. But
still value.
Yes, because Jalen Hurts, Mahomes at 130 each. No one else is below 16-1. So what you can do, Hurts is the most likely. Same thing goes for Mahomes if you think the Chiefs are going to win. But if you think Hurts is the most likely, for example, if you think the Eagles are more likely to win, a guy like Jalen Hurts, he's the most likely player to win. You're getting him at plus money. And AJ Brown, 18-1. Devontae Smith, 31-1. Miles Sanders, 25-1. You can
take both.
Right. You can have, and we have the Action Network hedging calculator where you can literally calculate this. The optimal amount that, let's say you put 100 on Hurts, the optimal amount to put on a guy like AJ Brown and still profit if either of them win. And guess what? It's not a lot. If you put $100 on Hurts at plus 130 on FanDuel, at 18-1 for AJ Brown, all you need to do is put another $12 on AJ Brown, and you're locking in about over $100 profit if either of them wins. Now, obviously, it doesn't mean either of them will win, but it's just once you roster Hurts, it's very cheap to also account for alternate scenarios where Hurts, where the Eagles win, but the most likely player, Hurts, doesn't win the MVP. So the same thing is true for Patrick Mahomes. Travis Kelce's 16-1. Mahomes is plus 130. You could just bet both of them. That can be your portfolio. You can even throw a third guy in there, and
or you could take, if you really like you want to get wild and just root for a crazy low scoring game and then just one defender to have like a pick six, and you could do that too. So I agree. That's a pretty good way to approach it. And I think if you like the Eagles, then it's even more like, I think there's just a hair better chance that someone other than Hurts wins it if the Eagles win than Mahomes. Just because it's narrative-y, right? Like even when Damian Williams, his game, like he didn't win it and he had 130 yards, 2 touchdowns, a game-winning touchdown, like it's still Mahomes. Like Mahomes' name carries so much weight that in order for like Kelce to win it, what is he going to need? 17 catches?
But I would actually disagree, because guess what? If Kelce were to win it, he'd have beaten his all-pro brother. Mahomes already has one. Like, I think this is like the one time where Travis Kelce probably has the narrative on his side. Like, he's going up against his brother. Everyone's kind of talking about that. And you have this one game where the Eagles have an elite group of corners on the outside. You have, at this point, no receivers. Like, you just know Valdez-Scantling is going to get locked up after he puts up 117 the week before, or the game before, I should say. Like, so I actually think the circumstances for Kelce, like the environment, is probably better than at least than the other 2 Super Bowls that he's played in. So I don't mind it. And he had, if you like Kelce, the anytime touchdown is probably still the way to go. He scored in 11 of his past 14 postseason games. He scored in each of his past 5 postseason games, 7 of his past 8 postseason games. All this dude does is score touchdowns in the playoffs. But because all he does is do that, now you're talking about like his anytime touchdown is minus 125. He's had 90 plus yards in 6 of his last 7 playoff games. If he gets 90 plus yards and a touchdown, this Eagles defense is pretty good. So Mahomes, it could be a game where Mahomes throws 1 touchdown. It's to Kelce. He throws for like 260 yards. Maybe there's a turnover involved. Maybe Pacheco has a good game, but you're not going to go Pacheco over Kelce unless Pacheco goes bonkers. Like you said, Williams didn't get it. So I think I do see some scenarios, especially because, like I said, Mahomes has his already. And there's this all the talk is Kelce versus Kelce. So I do think, and he might have like some celebration cooked up for if he does get in the end zone. Like, I do think there's a lot of like, this is, especially at 16-1. Cooper Kupp, for context, Cooper Kupp, as kind of that alpha dog receiver, obviously Chase was involved as well, but Cooper Kupp is that alpha receiver in that Super Bowl, was 6-1 last year. Kelce is 16-1. Is there that big a difference in terms of, okay, this guy can put up 100 plus and a touchdown or even 2? I don't think so. So I like the value here at Kelce. Now he could go down as the week progresses, but 16-1 on FanDuel is an amazing price, I think, for Kelce MVP.
Only other thing I wanted to bring up was Kerner. You guys are gonna have your prop palooza. I'm sure you'll talk about this more. You'll talk specifically about Sanders, but Sanders like plus 175 to be the leading rusher.
That's all right. You're already down to like 135. So we'll see. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see how that goes.
All right. I like Sanders props in general. I think he's gonna have a big game, but you guys will cover more of that. And that's about all I had.
Yeah. Let me see. Do I have anything else? Oh, just talk real quick. Some of the general trends for like, Super Bowl. I think you've mentioned this before. Usually we see kind of like a uneventful first quarter. And then I know both of these teams are really good in the second quarter at scoring. So, if you're one of those people that likes to bet, over unders or the race to whatever.
Yeah. First quarter unders are like,
unbelievable
in Super Bowls. You come out, teams are a little more conservative. I don't think that's going to be the case here. It's not the Eagles' MO, and the Chiefs have been here before. And I think that they want to jump out, but historically It's very slow starting. There's a lot of nerves. It's like long pregame, and then it really opens up late. So if that does indeed happen, look for a live over.
Mhm.
If you like the over and you're just a little hesitant now and want a better number of like something under 48, if there is a slow start, as there's been historically over and over again in the Super Bowl, then you can probably get a much better number if that trend holds. So yeah, the slow starts have been happening very often in the Super Bowls.
Yeah, so like what you can do really is if you like the over, you can try to bank on a slow start. Maybe you also play the first quarter under, but you can kind of look to add to your position with getting a live over maybe after the first quarter ends, or as it's kind of going downhill, slow paced, or just slow starting. And then both the Eagles and the Chiefs are top 3 in scoring in the second quarter. And then you could kind of then you're kind of looking better. And then if you like for anyone who likes the under, you might have another opportunity to get a better number, because there's Eagles average 12.4 a game in the second quarter, and the Chiefs 10.1. Both of those are top 3. Only 3 teams average double digits. So you could have like 27 points by halftime, and then hit the under then, and you may get a better number than the 51. Even if it does close at 51. And then, Kansas City's still good in the second half, 12.7, fourth. Philadelphia, though, 10.6, 15th. And a lot of that, they've kind of taken their foot off the gas in the second half. But, if Philly does have a lead, they're still going to try to run in the second half. If they don't, that probably means this game's not that high scoring to begin with, because, that would probably just mean the Chiefs have a lead if Philly's not if Philly's having to go pass heavy in the second half. So either way, just wanted to kind of throw those out there for people who might be looking to go quarter by quarter. First half in general is 11-5-1 to the under over the past 16, averaging a differential of 3.8 points per game. The first half under for the Super Bowl has hit in 4 in a row, 6 of the last 7, 8-2-1 in the past 11. And the second half, completely even, 9-9 over the past 18. Those numbers courtesy of our.
We've had some insane fourth quarters in the Super Bowl with like 28, 35 points. Yeah, just keep that in mind as you're watching the game and have fun. I think if this is the time where you can it's the last football game. Don't bet over your head, but if you want to throw in a few lotteries on first down, this is the only time I do it. First touchdown. Look here, listen to the prop episode. Go to actionnetwork.com. We'll have tons of content that'll help guide you to, when you're making those bets, like you said, make them a little more educated and plus EV decisions. But have fun with it, and hopefully this is the last podcast for me, last football podcast for me of the year. Appreciate everyone who listened to our big bets on campus, and then this. We had amazing years in both. You just absolutely crushed it on this. We gave out winners all year, and that's what ultimately this is all about. So I'm glad that we could just help people make money and have fun while doing it, and appreciate everyone that's along for the ride every year. And we'll be back. I'll be back again next year, hopefully better than ever. And let's close the year out strong. I appreciate everyone who listens and spreads the word, and all the audio team and video team on the back end, and of course you. And it was fun, partner.
They're always a pleasure, Stuck. And shouts to our guy Matt Mitchell, who painstakingly produces every one of these and tells us to stop talking 5 or 10 minutes sooner each time, because we're always going over.
Did we make it? What was our time here? You said an hour.
We're still going. We got a couple minutes. Got a couple minutes left for the 55.
We're gonna be pretty close.
But really appreciate everyone for listening. I'll still be here again. Kerner and I will have the Propapalooza episode that will be out Tuesday. So look out for that. And again, the early props episode with Kerner and I already out. Trivia episode with Stuck, Abrams, and I already out. And as you know, you can find Stucky on Twitter at Stucky2. You can find me at Chris Raybon, and we're at those same handles on the free award-winning Action Network app, where you can follow our bets or track your own. Until next time, let's get this money.